be able to do. Yes, thank you, Angelica. Angelica is she's my phone a friend for our first Zoom attempt here. So thank you for your patience. So for just a quick agenda for today, I thought we would do introductions, maybe briefly talk about the bill. Hopefully everyone has read the legislation, but if you haven't, or if you have any questions about it, sorry. Oh, Dave is on, but is Dave on? Dave Anderson is driving. And Aaron, Angelica, Aaron says he's in the biochar meeting, but he's an observer.
Okay, we can elevate everyone. Actually, if you make me a co-host, then I can help you elevate, Karen.
Okay, how do I
Just put in
make
my name and then just click on that side and I can go.
click on your name? Okay, let
There'll
me.
be three little arrows on the side, and then
So I think I made you a co-host.
yep, there you go. Thank you.
Okay. And so then we should see probably a phone number, and that'll be Dave Andrews from the Orphan Well program. And then there we go. And there's Aaron. Okay, so I think we have everybody. Sorry. Thank you, everybody. So today I just thought we'd do introductions, see if anyone has any questions about the legislation. And we're fortunate to have Janice and Amanda here. I know that they were very involved during session and trying to help write it in a way that would make all the work product doable for us as a working group. And then we have our CSU folks here. So I thought it would be helpful for them to maybe run through their thought process on timing for things, for the deliverables, and then we could maybe then talk as a work group about how often we need to meet in order to align ourselves with CSU and the work that they're doing related to the deliverables for the legislation. Wondering if that's acceptable to everybody, and if I've missed anything for anybody. Okay. So I'm going to start with introductions, and I will just work my way around the panel as I see it, if that's okay. And I'm going to start with Mike.
Commissioner McGowan, am I the only Mike?
I think so.
Okay. How long do you want these to be? I could give a brief synopsis of my background, or do you just want me to say my name?
Nope. If in a minute, in a minute or so.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. My name is Mike Wardinsky. I work for Occidental Petroleum. My background is I grew up in Montana. I graduated from Montana Tech in the year 2000 with a BS in petroleum engineering. I started my career in the San Juan Basin in New Mexico. I was a drilling engineer. I supported workover and P&A operations and then production engineering. I moved to Houston with ConocoPhillips in 2007. And that part of my career, I did hydraulic fracturing in South and East Texas. I resigned from ConocoPhillips and moved to Denver in 2010 to join Anadarko as a completion engineer and supported their DJ Basin frac activities as the entire basin transitioned from vertical to horizontal completions. From there, I held positions in reservoir engineering, production engineering supervisor for Anadarko, and now Occidental. Prior to my current role, I had a regulatory role where I supported DJ Basin Bradenhead compliance and wellbore integrity. I'm currently in Oxy's policy group supporting a variety of state and federal regulations for both air quality and E&P operations. I have been part of drilling, fracking, producing, well workover, P&A operations where I have been on location responsible for the operations in 4 states. And I am excited to represent the industry in this effort. I'm excited to see where this goes. My main objectives are to determine if biochar's use could be detrimental to P&A operation objectives. But also, per the legislation, I'm really excited to see and the efforts that the CSU is going to do in terms of how much emissions biochar will absorb, and also the total kind of equation of carbon footprint to see if creating biochar and bringing it to location will have a positive effect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next, I have Jenna.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenna Chanel with CPHE at Pollution Control Division. Um, Short background would be I started with the state a few years ago as an oil and gas inspector. Before that, before coming to the state, I've worked a variety of different roles. I originally came from Phoenix, Arizona, and worked for the Maricopa County Air Quality Department there and was an inspector, left there as a permitting supervisor. I worked for a few years at the city of Fort Collins, where I did their air quality program, policy development, and outreach for different initiatives there. When I came to the state, I came in as an oil and gas inspector. And from there, I took over a role for the legislative unit. The Air Pollution Control Division really didn't have specific people designated just solely to work on legislative work. So Robin Willie, which most of you may have been familiar with, she went back to the Attorney General's office. She was originally my boss, and me and her had a kind of a brainchild to create a unit just to solely focus on legislative work. And so she went back to the Attorney General's office, which left me as the standing chief stands alone on the legislative bill. So I did help work on this bill during legislative session. I now report to Jeremy Newstifter, which he does our lobbying. Works with the legislative liaison, and so usually we'll see him out front working at the Capitol. Where I'm usually behind the scenes at the division, keeping track of all the bills and helping coordinate. So our position on this bill originally was pretty neutral. You know, we're excited for any opportunities to look at other things that we can do other than business as usual. I think biochar has a lot of potential opportunities, and we're really excited to see what CSU is going to bring. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jenna. Next, I have Kathleen Draper.
Hello, all. I am coming to you from the Finger Lakes part of New York State. I've been in the biochar industry for about 12 years. I'm pretty sure this whole idea was one of my crazy ideas that I blogged about 3 years ago. And thankfully, somebody like Janice took it forward and made things happen. So I'm very thankful. I'm also an advisor to a company that's doing this sort of thing elsewhere. And we've been talking to the likes of Aramco, well, that's coming up, and ExxonMobil and Shell and a few others. So I think there's a lot of interest. I've worked on the ag side of biochar. I've worked on the using composite side of biochar. I'm the current board chair for the International Biochar Initiative, so I have a really good network of people on the research side and the commercial side, which I'm happy to bring to this group as needed.
Thank you, Kathleen. Amanda.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Amanda West-Fordham. I'm the Associate Director of the Science and Data Division at the Colorado State Forest Service. Briefly, the major programs in the division are geospatial data and analysis, forest health, forest monitoring, forest inventory and analysis, experiential learning, and applied research. And that latter program is how I was initially brought in to provide some consultation when this bill was being drafted. We're doing a statewide woody biomass assessment currently in our applied research program. And I hope to reach out to our CSU experts who many are on this call today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Amanda. And then I have Brooke and then Susie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brooke Slaggy, and I'm part of the CSU team. I have a master's in chemical engineering, and I'm a research associate in the Department of Mechanical Engineering currently. And my expertise lies with techno-economic analysis and life cycle assessment, so understanding the carbon footprint of the different processes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you. My name is Susie Strife. I am the Director of Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience for Boulder County. And I think I'm drawn into this because we are doing a lot of innovation support in terms of funding, both regional scale biochar pilots as well as local Boulder County climate innovation pilots here for the application of biochar. So looking forward to learning more about all of you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Next I have Stephen and then Janice.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephen Arauza. I am here as a member of the Environmental Justice Advisory Board. And I've got a background in oil and gas regulation, having worked at the Railroad Commission of Texas in their orphan well plugging program for a while before coming to the state of Colorado to work as an environmental protection specialist at the ECMC, dealing with spill response and remediation. So my concerns primarily have to do with siting and protection of disproportionately impacted communities, and just trying to learn more about this project. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Janice Hallowell. Yes, Kathleen is correct. I learned about this from her originally about 3.5 years ago. And at the time I was looking at what was it going to take to plug the leaking orphan wells in Colorado. And it just kind of went from there. It just seems like such a really perfect way to approach plugging these wells that need to be plugged in a way that's better, using biochar cement and also biochar in the plug. And so, I then got involved with Representative McCormick to make a bill, and she did, and we promoted it. And so now here we are in the advisory group. And so happy to see everybody here. Really, really interested in learning more about this and seeing what we can get proved out. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Now I have Thomas and then Jason.
Yeah, so I'm Thomas Borg. I'm a professor at Colorado State University in the Department of Chemistry, Civil and Environmental Engineering, and also Soil and Crop Sciences. I got involved with issues related to oil and gas, and especially hydraulic fracturing, about 15 years ago on projects where we started out evaluating the downhole fate of chemicals. So basically what happens to all the hydraulic fracturing fluids at high pressure and temperature. Later, we studied spills and the fate of spills and chemistries after, spills of hydraulic fracturing fluid in agricultural soil and in water. And then in the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've especially been focusing on treatment and reuse of produced water, the focus on agricultural reuse in form of irrigation. And besides all the work I've done on oil and gas, we have also focused a lot of our effort on characterization of biochar, not only synthesis of biochar, but also physical and chemical characterization of biochar, both as a solvent, but also as a soil amendment. And I think our contribution to this particular project would be on evaluating the chemistry and the physics of biochar from the perspective of absorbing methane, and also interactions with chemical constituents that are present in these flowback waters, even though there's no flowback, I guess, when you plug it. But yeah, gases.
Great, thanks, Thomas. My name is Jason Quinn. I'm a professor in mechanical engineering, as well as the operating director of the Energy Institute at Colorado State University. My expertise is in life cycle assessment and technoeconomics, and so I've been working in a variety of different topics, ranging anywhere from produced water treatment all the way to biological systems. And so this overlaps a lot of different areas, which is kind of exciting for us. And so obviously I work directly with Brooke, so good to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Now I have Quinn and Holly.
Hi, I'm Quinn Antis. I'm with the Colorado Energy Office focused on carbon management. So all things CCUS, biochar being part of that. I'll be making a roadmap for Colorado about how we can employ carbon management. And so very interested in this. My background is mostly in social entrepreneurship and facilitating public-private coordination, public-private investments. yeah, excited for this conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Holly Roth. I am part of the CSU team. I'm a research scientist for Thomas, and I was a former graduate student in his group where I researched the effects of wildfires on soil, carbon, and nitrogen here in Colorado, really focusing a lot on fate and transport of these newly formed compounds. So I'm really excited to take what I've done so far and apply it to a new system. And
Great, thank you. Then I have Jacob and Dan, and we'll go one more, see what everyone's memory is doing, and then Aaron.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Vanderst. I am a part of the CSU team as well. I'm a third-year graduate student in the chemistry department in Dr. Thomas Bork's lab. And similar to Holly, I study the effects that wildfires have on transformations of soil organic matter, and very happy to be here in this meeting.
Hi, Dan Zimmerly. I'm from Colorado State University. I'm director of methane emissions. I run a group called the Methane Emissions Technology Evaluation Center out of the Energy Institute. So same part of the university as Jason Quinn comes from as well. We, among other things relative here, is that we just completed a fairly major measurement study of plugged, orphaned, and abandoned wells in Colorado. And that's about to go to, the report's already gone off to COGCC or whatever they're called now. And we're also about to send a paper in on that. And so if we have a chance, I can show a few slides, a few results from that later on.
Thanks, Dan. And then just for folks' edification, that presentation will also be given at a joint meeting in September to the ECMC and the Orphan Well Enterprise program. Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aaron Ray. I am Assistant Director for Energy Innovation in the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. I advise Executive Director Dan Gibbs on energy issues. As a disclaimer, I'm attending this meeting in my capacity as DNR Assistant Director, not in my role as DNR's designee to the ECMC. And I just appreciate your engagement with this issue and your contributions to the advisory group. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. And then people have moved a little bit. Okay, so now I have Michelle and Carmia. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And Delyn.
Great. Hi, I'm Michelle Gabriel Parrish. I am the founder of Once and Future Green. It's an environmental justice consulting group. I work a lot at the intersection of community and a lot of the issues that you all are looking at, energy, science, and sustainability. I was asked to be on this advisory to represent disproportionately impacted communities and environmental justice. And that is in part because I had done some community-based work on biochar, just really small scale experimental projects. And because of that was asked from Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance to develop a biochar and environmental justice report. Since there's a growing interest in biochar, but not a great understanding of the impacts that could be for frontline communities. So hopefully we'll be able to, as a committee, take a look at that report, and I can send you all a copy at some point. And before doing that, I'm excited that Kathleen is here, had read her book, and had brought some of that to communities as well. So it's an honor to be here and to try to help represent disproportionately impacted communities that are often left behind in these conversations, and not only bear the brunt of things like oil and gas, but sometimes get left out of the benefits and getting to have the economic opportunity that comes with cleaning them sometimes.
Hello, I'm Carmia Woolley. I'm a natural resource specialist with the Bureau of Land Management. I work with Kimba Anderson on the fluid minerals team at the Colorado State office. So looking forward to working with you all, learning and exploring opportunities. Thank you.
Hey everyone, Delyn Southern, Associate Director for strategic initiatives and finance with the Colorado Energy Office. My role is just to help conceptualize and launch new programs. So Quinn from my team is on this call too, and her and I will be looking at this as we develop our carbon management roadmap.
Great, thank you. And then, sorry, so I think Quinn might be next. And then I think Dave is on the phone. I think that's the phone number. And then Daphne, oh, sorry, Quinn, did you already say hello? You did, sorry. Okay, so then we have Dave and then Daphne, if you just want to introduce yourself. And then I think we've made it through introductions and it's only have to do it once. So thank you for your patience. So I'm wondering if Dave cannot unmute himself. So we'll skip Dave, but Dave runs our Orphan Well program. And I think hopefully can give us some insight into opportunities and or potential limitations for how we might be able to use state or federal funding for plugging, and opportunities maybe for some of the orphan wells to participate in whatever we might recommend, etc. So I hope I haven't gone too far in what I've said that Dave would do or not do. And then Daphne.
Hi, everyone. Daphne Gervais. I am the Legislative Director with the Department of Natural Resources. Just tuning into your meeting today. I worked a little bit on the bill that created this group. I'm so curious to see how this work unfolds. So I'll be probably popping in and out of your meetings over the course of the next several weeks, but thank you all in advance for the work and time that you're putting into this.
Great, thank you. And I think I see that Dave unmuted himself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Dave Andrews. I have a few different degrees in engineering. I've been with the commission for going on 18 years now. When biochar first came up a couple of years ago, I guess, I was the engineering manager and I had some concerns with any potential detrimental effects downhole. And that's because there was little, if any, laboratory results related to this application in oil and gas. And our commission rules require that basically anything that goes down in the hole during a plugging job is a material that's ordinarily used for plugging wells, which biochar is not, at least not at this point. So I'm very interested in the laboratory testing aspect of this to determine if biochar has any potential benefits or if it has any detriments while plugging the well.
Thanks, Dave. I think that's a good summary of some of the many questions that we're going to try to address as the advisory group and make recommendations around. The second piece I thought might be helpful is, has everyone read the bill? Does anyone have any questions about anything that is in the bill? And I could potentially try to share my screen and find the act if folks wanted to. If not, Janice, you can help remind me. I'm hesitant to monkey too much as the host here of the Zoom and then like lose you all. But I did read through it again. I've read it a couple times. I read it through it again this morning. If we could put things into buckets, one of the tasks for CSU will be to do a desktop review, I guess, of what other states have done, any research out there related to biochar and the efficacy and its use for downhole plugging or carbon capture and or as an additive to cement. And if I'm missing anything, Janice, give a shout.
Okay, well, let's see. Maybe some of these legislative folks that are on the call might know some.
I had it up. It's just that if I can't minimize my screen as the host, but I could try to share the act itself. I just wanted to walk through some of the big things that lucky CSU, I think you all are being mostly assigned the work and the research and then coming back to the committee for discussion and recommendations. Oh, Michelle, thank you.
So I know that Rep McCormick, the last time she and I talked about this, she was saying that yes, CSU is going to do desk and lab portions of this study and hopefully get as close to trying things in the ground in wells, if not actually getting into wells. She would like to see it go that far if it can.
Okay, so let me just stop here and say, does anyone have any questions about what they read in the legislation? And then I thought it might be helpful just to transition over to the CSU folks and discuss how they're thinking this will play out and timelines. Thank you, Michelle. Go ahead.
Not sure exactly if it's a question, but it seems like a big focus of this is on the research and science around, does this work, how much, where, in what ways? And I just want to make sure that we're plugging that some of that should probably incorporate community engagement, and that needs to be part of any scientific equation of where these things are cited. The other thing I wanted to say too, and Kathleen can probably speak to it more later, but in some of the research that I did of biochar, it seemed like we're calling many things biochar. And so I'd love to hear also from the researchers how we might address that, and the fact that we actually need to be testing for multiple different types of biochar. So multiple different types of biochar, and then also how are we going to ensure that engagement is part of this research process.
Michelle, I want to put in the parking lot the community engagement piece, because I would like us as a group to talk about what that might look like and the role of this group in ensuring that that gets folded in. And then maybe figuring out if how we link that to what CSU is doing, or if the working group could maybe tackle that piece as the advisory group. So can I put that in the parking lot, and knowing that that's something that we need to talk about? Okay.
Yeah, I think we can add it in the parking lot and sort of ask the researchers too to keep an eye on that and think of it as part of the equation.
Okay, great. So, does anyone else have anything they want to add, or they're concerned about making sure it gets addressed, or how we might address it?
I just had a general question. It would be good for us to understand, obviously the motivation behind this bill is pretty clear. You want to mitigate, greenhouse gas emissions from often wells, but decide, how much scientific, background and thought were put into the bill. One thing is to write a bill. How did you come up with the idea of biochar and cement, for example, and not other potential measures to limit methane emissions from oil and gas wells? So again, how much, where did this all come from? And the whole idea about using biochar, is it based on scientific evaluations and evidence, or was it an idea that you basically want us to test now? A little bit of background, would be great, just to understand the full motivation and goals, because they can help us, target the research questions better, I think.
I'll let Janice start off to tackle that, and then if folks who are helping work on the bill want to add anything, they certainly may.
So Thomas, I don't know that you were on the email list that I sent preparatory materials to. I sent a fact sheet for the bill that has links about every single little thing, to peer-reviewed papers, and also a video about the overall concept. Did you not get that?
I didn't get that, but I did get some of the early drafts where we could comment on the bill, but it was at a point of time where it was more about figuring out who could potentially address the different questions. So sure. I didn't get that material. I am pretty aware of the fact that biochar can absorb methane and so forth. So I'm just trying to figure out what laid the foundation for this bill and who involved with respect to the input, and how much it's based in science or just a good idea that needs to be tested to see if it's valid, over the next 1 year.
Well, nobody has tested it in whole, as Dave said, but there have been labs testing biochar having to do with fossil fuels and also biochar and cement in a lot of places around the country. And right here in Colorado, we have School of Mines that's doing a lot of work on it. NREL is currently doing quite a bit of work on this. Stony Brook University, where I got a lot of my initial information, has done a lot of work on this. And there are peer-reviewed papers for every aspect of this that I originally proposed to the drafters of the bill. No, there is not a particular report about how it works to mitigate emissions from oil and gas wells. That's why we're doing what we're doing. But there is all kinds of background support in other things, and I would be really happy to send you that sheet with all the links, and you can sort of see where it's just a sampling of some of the papers, but it wasn't just an idea that got dreamed up and somebody said, "Oh, wouldn't that be cool?" It's an idea that's really supported in all of its pieces by peer-reviewed papers by recommended scientists from all over the world. Singapore University, people in India, Stony Brook, lots of other places. I think I can probably get your email, and anybody else that wants it, I'd be really happy to send on that information for future meetings.
Janice, I'm going to try to set up a space on the ECMC website for the biochar working group. And I am happy to post the materials that you sent out. And I apologize. I think the CSU folks, for whatever reason, were not on the Zoom link. So I will set that up and I will post Janice's stuff. I'd be happy also to post Michelle, whatever your study involved. I think that would be helpful for everyone to review as well. I saw Stephen and then Kathleen raise their hands.
I've got another question. So if Kathleen is responding to the current conversation, I'm happy to wait my turn.
Yeah, I was just going to say two things to add on to what Janice said. It has been tried for things like fluidity and stuff like that, but not really tested afterwards. So it was just done to see if commercial equipment could be used. And there was no techno-economic assessment from what I know officially done or definitely not shared. And the other thing is we were hoping originally that some portion of the methane reduction could receive carbon reduction credits to help finance this moving forward. So it would be great if that could be tested, and a methodology, which is already in the works for capping oil wells, but not necessarily for biochar. So that was kind of behind that.
Stephen, did you want to go?
Yes, thank you. I would like to know, given a lot of the conversation that we've had and regarding the research and kind of my reading of the bill seems to be, concerned with the application of biochar in this specific setting. But I'd like to know what research is available and what would factor into this conversation with regard to sort of the upstream effects of the manufacture of the biochar, particularly, the source of the material, potential impacts with regard to scaling up something like this, some small scale operations to an industrial scale, and what the communities surrounding the production of biochar would have this concerns as well. And I really do appreciate being in this work group along with Michelle. Michelle, I've read your report. I think it's excellent. So thank you for that. That's been a good primer in addition to reading through the materials that has been provided by everyone else. But the upstream side is the short version of my question.
Just a question, is Jonah Levine going to be on this? Because he would be a good one to answer that since he's a producer in Colorado.
Yes, he is on this group and he was invited and I didn't hear back from him. So I will check in with him, Kathleen. Just to go back even a little further, this concept of using biochar in oil and gas operations, Thomas, was brought in front of the ECMC when it was the Oil and Gas Commission, along with a presentation from some researchers and from our staff on what they knew what other states were doing. And I think there were still some questions about the efficacy and its use before we would the commission would sign off, as Dave said, on this being a regular use of biochar for, downhole plugging, for example, which it, and I'll do an and ECMC is not in the business of figuring out carbon trading, for example. And so that's kind of outside of its purview. And I think that it's going to be interesting. Hopefully this working group can come up with some ideas. And then the other piece I think that got brought up in the presentation with the commission was the making of cement is also high carbon production, and could biochar, if it was an ingredient or an additive or whatever, help reduce the footprint of an I'll use the word ingredient, I guess, that's used a lot in oil and gas. So just to set that kind of background as well. And so Janice has just been working on it for a long time. And when we said, we don't have enough, went to the legislature. Good on you, Janice.
I just want to say, I mean, based on my professional experience and so forth, I think the objectives are great. And I think there's a lot of, biochar shows a lot of promise. And so the goals with the bill are perfectly aligned with, goals that I believe should be investigated further before you start to scale up to pilot and so forth. So I don't have any criticism as such. I was just more thinking about, what was the foundation? How did it all start? It's always good to figure out how it all started, but I know the literature very well. I've worked in the biochar space for a long time, and also in oil and gas realm. So I think it's an excellent bill. I think the questions are excellent. So thank you.
Great. Anything else that anyone wants to add? Okay. I am going to turn it over to the CSU folks for your thoughts about the bill, the deliverables, timeframes, how the advisory group what role it can play in keeping track of whether things are on track, pinch points where we should jump in and provide recommendations, kind of what your thoughts are. And then maybe that could help lead into the conversation about how often this group should be meeting. And I don't know who wants to take the lead for CSU.
I'll start. I can talk about kind of what I'll be working on. Specifically, I'll be working on the economic analysis and life cycle assessment. And can I share my screen? Let's see here.
Brooke, I think all the panelists can share. There you go.
Okay, great. Can you guys all see that?
I can, yes.
So I'll be leading the effort on the economic and environmental analysis portion of the task, specifically tasks 1, A, C, and D, reviewing literature, task 6, assessing the costs associated with the use of biochar in the plugging of the oil and gas well, and then examining if the use of biochar for plugging is consistent with the state's short-term and long-term goals, and then determining if biochar could result in carbon credits. First, I'll be creating a process model to understand all the steps involved in the well plugging process. Then I'll be able to estimate the costs associated with those various stages of well plugging using biochar by identifying all the relevant inputs, outputs, and processes. Once that is complete, I can start working on a life cycle assessment to understand the environmental impact of well plugging using the biochar, starting with a review of the relevant literature on the matter and then calculating the greenhouse gas emissions associated with that. Once I have the values for the CO2 equivalents, I can examine the impact that using biochar will have on the state's pollution reduction goals by comparing it to business as usual and then evaluating if the process can result in carbon credits. I would say each step will probably take a couple months, and then hopefully we'll have those values that we can share with the group.
Thanks, Brooke. Does anyone have any questions about what Brooke just showed us? Thanks for being so thoughtful and prepared.
I have a question.
Yep. Okay. And I think Stephen does too. So Janice, do you want to go and then Stephen?
Sure. Kathleen had one first, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see who it came from.
Are there certain assumptions around where the biomass for the biochar comes from? Is it Colorado specific? And are there other assumptions about, mobile equipment versus centralized and things like that? I mean, how are you prioritizing that? Because the cost of doing it and the carbon impact can vary widely.
I'll be working with Amanda on looking at the biomass capacity, and I believe we're just looking at the state of Colorado for what biomass we can use with the biochar. And then for the equipment, some of it will be stationary, some of it will be mobile. So we'll be doing a full evaluation and seeing all of the equipment that's used in plugging the oil and gas wells.
So I'm going to go Stephen, Janice, Michelle.
Thank you. I'd like to know if the comparison of using biochar to business as usual with regard to the pollution goals would include the byproducts, waste streams, and emissions associated with the production of biochar.
I think that's something to look into further. And as I'm doing the research and getting into it, it'll be something I'll be evaluating.
If I can chime in there on that specific comment, I mean, it's going to focus on greenhouse gas accounting first and foremost. I think that that's based on what the scope is now. You make a great point in terms of there's a lot of different metrics we can look at. And so I think my biggest concern in general is just scope creep, what we can and cannot get done and what we can do effectively and do well. And so I guess that's something else that I'd like to just kind of chime in and have everybody keep in mind, right?
Anna.
Okay, so I was going to ask the same thing that Kathleen asked, but I want to maybe add to that just a little bit here and say, Brooke, are you considering the various iterations of percentages of carbon in the biochar based on various feedstocks? That's one of the things that is really lacking from research is, what percentage of biochar will work for this, and also what kinds of feedstocks, what will they do, in the lab and in the desk and eventually in the ground. So is that part of the way you've set it up? I don't think I saw that in your list, was to explore that. That would be one thing that you could really use Jonah's expertise on, because of knowing, various feed sources and, what's possible for the biochar itself.
Yeah, definitely. I think there needs to be more. I need to be told what percentage of biochar will be going into the concrete. So I don't know if we're going to be doing laboratory testing on how much biochar we can add in as an additive with the Portland cement. But once I have those values, yeah, I'll be looking at what biomass is used for the biochar. If we're doing pyrolysis, what type of pyrolysis? Is it fast pyrolysis? What temperatures? Because obviously what biomass you're using and how you're performing the pyrolysis to get the biochar will affect its ability to absorb methane. So that is something I'll be looking at.
Yeah, and to Jason's point, all of that really does indicate an economic factor that we have to take into account, because if it isn't affordable to do, then nobody's going to want to do it. But it seems to me that one of the things that really has to be weighed is the higher quality of biochar with higher carbon content. How expensive is it to sequester in these wells, and how much greenhouse gas mitigation is it going to do, weighed against the cost, weighed against the cost of that. So I'm hoping that is all going to be looked at over time in this.
Yeah, given the scope of the timeline, I don't know how much I'll be able to do, but I will be looking at that. I don't know that I'll be able to have the time to compare 5 different pyrolysis methods with 5 different biomasses, but I can certainly I'd be looking at the specifics of the biomass and the pyrolysis method and how that impacts the economic and environmental assessment.
That sounds really great. And, just from the information that comes to me through scientists around, the space, it seems that plugging wells this way with biochar, both in the cement, but also as a standalone in the void where, where they're currently filling it with whatever, rocks, mud, sand, dirt. Those two factors in order to sequester carbon and also to mitigate the emissions are really good forms of CDR, and are starting to look like they're much more affordable than other forms of CDR at this point in time. And I'm thinking in specific of direct air capture, which is getting a lot of attention, but it's still very expensive and hasn't been worked out yet. So as an alternative to that, or maybe as something we do while we're still figuring that out, this is a really good form of that. And I'm hoping that the study will take that into account, looking at it as a form of CDR.
I just want to comment. I can see there's other questions, but just comment in response. So if there are no data, if there's if no experiments have been conducted on all these different types of biochars from the perspective of absorbing methane, and especially from wells that emit other things than methane, it's very, very difficult to estimate the sorption capacity and how efficient these different biochars are. I think this first part of the study will evaluate, okay, what is the evidence, based on a literature review. That's the first part of this effort here at CSU. And we can use a lot of the information where people or scientists have investigated methane sorption in lab studies with different types of both activated carbon and biochars. And then we will see what type of biochar that has been, used for these studies. But again, even if you have the same feedstock, if you just change the temperature a little bit, the physical and chemical properties will be different. If there's a little bit of oxygen present during the pyrolysis, it will be a little bit different. So it's very source specific. And I think some of the lab experiments that we're proposing to do could study a few of the feedstocks that are relevant for Colorado. So let's say we want to use some of the woody biomass from forest. Maybe we want to use other types of woody biomass. And maybe we have some temperatures and pyrolysis conditions in mind, based on what is being done at an industrial scale right now in Colorado. And we can try to set up experiments that targets those pyrolysis circumstances and determine the methane sorption capacity. But I'm just saying it's really, really difficult because there's no evidence, and it's not only methane that comes out, and there might be, other things that we need to consider. So they will all compete for sorption sites and so forth. But these are great questions, I think.
Okay, I know Michelle's had her hand up for a while.
Thank you. And Thomas, I'm so glad to hear your response, because I'm just remembering a little bit of science that I learned, and it was like, you want like minimal variables. And I feel like already in this conversation, we're like, hey, we have ideas around 1 million variables, and we're really just getting started. And that's what I was saying before about biochar is actually many different things. And then we're actually trying to solve for many different problems at the same time. So I'm glad you sound willing to engage that. My question is sort of threefold. It is one, if the CSU team, is this fully funded? Are we looking for additional funds? Is this funded from the state and we're good to go? So I'm kind of curious about that and where you all feel that is. And I'm also wondering if there's within that ability to make sure in the budget, just to come back to my question about community engagement and see if there could be some funding for some community engagement in there. And, hearing about the economic analysis, really wanting to plug or figuring out how we can at least make sure that we're looking at the just transition model, which is a large part of the environmental justice movement, which has really said, transition is inevitable. That's what we're talking about here. but justice is not. We have to be conscientious to make justice a part of that. So is there a way that we can at least look at the just transition model and see how it might serve the economic analysis? So those are my 3 questions in one.
I guess I'll jump in. I'm not familiar with the transition model, but that's something that I can definitely look at more and see how I can use it within my economic analysis.
And are you feeling fully funded for at least this phase of the research?
I mean, what has been funded are some very, very specific objectives, and most of the objectives relates to reviewing the literature, and then others focus on some select laboratory experiments, you know, looking at basically interactions of biochar with methane and other chemicals, and also biochar with cement. And then, I mean, that is a very specific list, and it's funded just to do that, actually, from the CSU side, 3 FTs for 1.5 years. So it's only three people for 1.5 years. So it's not like massive, but I think it's a really good start. And it's basically like a phase 1, if I understand it correctly. And if it shows promise, well, then we can start to consider all these other important things before we implement. But I think the primary thing is to evaluate, is this a good idea or is it a bad idea? You know, does it have promise? And if it does have promise, how do we do it best going forward? And then we can scale up to a pilot scale investigation. That's my understanding.
Yeah, I think that's a good response, Thomas. And then also, Michelle, as part of the work of this group is to try to figure out if there might be other funding sources that could feed into phase 2 and kind of more of the lab work and the actual pilot testing of real world on the ground kind of application. So Stephen and then Kathleen, and I am cognizant, I feel like the CSU folks have a stop at 4. I'm not sure if that is true, but if that is the case, I want to make sure that we can talk to you all about when it might make sense for us to have our next meeting, and maybe what should or could be on the agenda for our next meeting from your perspective. Thanks.
If they've got a hard stop at 4, I'm happy to hold my question for later.
So CSU folks, do you all have to jump off at 4? Or can you hang on for a few minutes while we walk through some things? I
can hang on.
I have a hard stop at 4, so in fact I have to take off now to get there. So,
okay.
See you.
Dan, did we miss anything? Are you good?
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple slides about what we've discovered from actually going out and measuring wells. I'm not sure we can cover it in a minute and a half, but
you want to give us the 1-sentence summary, the elevator speech?
Yeah, so emissions from wells in Colorado are higher than they are elsewhere in the country, at least from the studies that have been done. However, that's not driven by truly kind of abandoned wells. That's driven by wells that were in areas where the gathering system shut down. Wells were orphaned and then they went into receivership. The owners went into receivership. So it's really the orphaned part was the large bar on the chart. Okay. The other thing was I can't remember exactly how many you did, 70 or so plugged wells. We found none that were leaking. Okay, so all of the wells that we had emissions from were for wells that had some amount of above ground existing infrastructure, ranging from a pipe sticking out of the ground to a complete, well pad there. So, and we have a paper. It's about to go in to journal here shortly.
Great. So. Thanks, Dan. And I also just want to be cognizant that I think Julie really wants this to be presented to the commission before it starts going out different places, Dan. So just want to make sure we're all aligned.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So let's see. Do we still have Stephen? Sorry, now people are all moving around. There's Stephen. Stephen, I think you had your hand up and then someone else did, but the hand disappeared. Might have been Kathleen.
Sure, I'll jump in. I just wanted to know, if not at this phase, at which phase would it be appropriate to assess the application of biochar in an oil and gas capacity for unintended impacts to environmental medium, to surface water, groundwater, soil, and reclamation suitability for soil.
So I'll try to take a stab at that, and anyone else can chime in. I think that's outside of the scope of this particular legislation and this work of this working group. But that doesn't mean we can't make recommendations. And I think Thomas looks like he wants to say something too.
Yeah, I mean, so it's a question, if we implement biochar around and in these wells as a way to mitigate methane, is the question whether it could potentially cause adverse environmental impacts on soil and water? Is that the question?
Yes, correct.
Okay, so in my research group over the last 10 years, I worked a lot with biochar, especially as a soil amendment in order to improve soil health. So in general, all the biochar we're talking about using for this particular project would be biochar that we would normally develop for improving soil health, so increasing water holding capacity, nutrient holding capacity, minimize erosion. So none of these biochars in themselves will be toxic, so to speak. You know, some of the byproducts when you produce biochars are PAHs, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, and that has been studied a lot, you know, whether that could potentially cause concern. So I think the focus should be on biochar, you know, that is normally being manufactured for as a soil amendment and for improving soil health. I don't see why we should not be able to use exactly the same for this purpose, to minimize any types of risk and leaching and so forth. So most chemicals, you know, I work on biochar production from municipal wastewater solids. So like biosolids that contain pharmaceuticals and PFAS and all of these nasty compounds. And what we're looking at within my group right now is the extent to which you basically eliminate all these constituents during the pyrolysis. And it turns out that more or less everything is mineralized at 500 degrees centigrade, and whatever is left is incorporated into that biomass and immobilized. But it's definitely something that one needs to consider, especially if you have massive amounts of biochar. It's a good question.
Lots of good questions. Kathleen, did you have a question? I didn't know if you had your hand up.
Just made a comment in the chat that in discussions with ExxonMobil, they're definitely looking to fund stuff like this. So at the appropriate time, if there's interest, I'm happy to facilitate an introduction to whoever wants to join that call.
Wonderful. And then Janice.
Yes, to the point of biochar in soils around the wells. That was proposed, but in this particular legislation, it was decided to keep it, contained within plugging orphan wells. But that doesn't mean, like Commissioner McGowan said, that we shouldn't be looking at what it would take to actually mitigate the toxins in the soils around the wells, because of course that's a big part of remediation, is to get the soil. And it has been so well proven that in agriculture that biochar works really well for that. And the way it works in agriculture is the same as how it would work around a well, as far as we know, as in it doesn't look like there are any toxins that would come out of the biochar itself unless the biochar was from a feedstock that was super toxic. And so, that's something to be concerned about. Like, what is the biomass? If it's something that contains, radioactive material or, PVCs or,
PFAS.
All kinds of PFAS, yes, thank you. Then maybe we wouldn't want to use it for this experiment, because it would factor up the toxins. But if it's agricultural grade, the signs seem to point to that it's really safe to use. And I think that, of course, that will be something that will be looked at. Thanks.
Okay. CSU folks, do you have anything else to add? Are different folks taking on different parts of?
I don't know. I mean, I asked Jacob and Holly to prepare a few slides, just do a very quick, literature review from the perspective of using CHARS for methane capture. I don't know if that is of any interest. Obviously, Janice and her crew has already done some of that, and she will be sharing that later. But we took a really quick glimpse into the literature and just had 2 slides that kind of summarize something. Happy to present it. We can also wait till another day.
Okay. All right. So based on the conversation and based on what we know are the deliverables, and I'm uncertain about the cadence of this group. I would love to have a conversation about it and try to understand how often we should be meeting. And then as Carmia is still here, I also wanted to point out that one of the reasons Janice, correct me if I'm wrong, that we wanted BLM represented is potentially somewhere down the line, if we have a conversation about what funding might be available or what kinds of wells we might want to pilot with, making sure that we're meeting all the expectations under the federal rules and guidelines. And in particular, this additional funding that the state has gotten to plug and abandoned orphan wells. Some of those are with federal funding and some of them are on federal lands. And so I want to be mindful too of Carmia's time and what it is that would be helpful to get from her in her role, and how often we want to make sure that she's folded in and what her capacity is to participate in the group. And so Carmia, I don't know if you're listening, if you have any thoughts about any of that, and if working group members, if you have any thoughts for Carmia.
So I am listening. I think it would be fruitful for me to listen to a lot of these conversations. I currently don't know of others researching the use of biochar in plugging. So just educating myself so that way, and I can educate others and I can ask the right questions, and kind of like when I introduced myself, just working with you all, learning, but then exploring what opportunities might be out there. So I will be reaching out to BLM more broadly and see what opportunities might be there, or if anybody else is conducting the research. So I guess my question to this group, do you know of any other federal involvement in biochar research? I'm assuming that the Forest Service is involved in research, but maybe not with the fluid minerals aspect.
There's some silence from the group, Carmia. So I think that is a good question, and we're maybe not aware of any other research at the federal level. But Michelle and Janice are raising their hand. So, okay, Janice and then Michelle.
I have been working with a person at Congresswoman DeGette's office about moving this into the federal sphere. And I would love to talk to you more about that, Carmia. Also, NREL is working on doing things on a federal level too. So there is some interest in it in terms of using the IRA bill to fund some more research and possibly get this, moved into federal lands, of which 24% of the orphan wells exist on federal land. So getting some action there, and also in tribal nations, is really an important step. So I've been working a little bit on that. Would love to have more help with moving into that sphere. If anybody's interested in that, we can talk. Thank you.
Michelle, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was going to say that the other interest I have in this, aside from just the pure environmental justice side, is really holistic, integrated ecological design. And so that's also part of my background, is seeing how these things work in whole systems. And so for me, when I hear about BLM or working on federal lands, I don't know. So that statistic you just gave, Janice, is helpful, the 24%. But when I think about large federal land and biochar, I start thinking about the more well-known application of biochar, which is around soil fertility and building soil fertility and the capacity to mitigate for climate change based on soil fertility. So this is not exactly the answer, but it's more that if, we're really looking at large swaths of land, it may be worth talking not just about biochar for oil and well plugging, which is like very specific, but for soil fertility, which has, I think, been looked at a little bit more. There's more research and has really big potential in terms of climate.
And I just respond to that and say, we really need to do both, but this bill is particularly about plugging the wells. Kind of unfortunately, we can't cover every aspect of biochar usage in this bill. And I'm right with you. Yes, the soil uses are very, very important. But in order to stay focused on getting orphan wells plugged using this biochar, kind of developing a method, we had to kind of limit the bill to the one thing.
Yes, I'm not saying to expand it for this group. I'm just saying
okay.
For folks at BLM, that if you're starting to look at biochar, I'd really start there. And California has done some really good work on that.
Okay, I'm just going to try to keep the group moving along a little bit. Wondering what folks' thoughts are about the cadence of the meeting of this group and setting up agendas. So I'm happy to chair and try to put it all together in the Zoom meetings and create agendas. I think part of that is going to be determined by how quickly CSU gets through things and what kinds of things come up for discussion. And then maybe even amongst this advisory group, Michelle, I think maybe one of our agendas is around how we can insert community engagement as part of this work and some of the recommendations that we're going to make. I mean, that feels like a whole conversation in and of itself. So I would love people's feedback and thoughts about that.
Yeah, I can start out if you wish. So you mentioned a lot of other folks that are working on related issues, including School of Mines. I think it would be great if you could get some insight into that network of folks, because we might have to reach out and rely on some of their expertise in order to, address all the objectives of the bill. We obviously work on a daily basis with both Boulder and School of Mines, but it'd be great to hear who's already engaged. I probably know them, but so we don't reinvent the wheel. So that's number one. Let's see if we can take it. We are only 3 guys up here at CSU, and there are objectives that we are not a direct experts in. Okay, so it would be great to reach out to other people and get them involved. Number 2, we have not received, to the best of my knowledge, the funding yet. So we can't start anything. We can't start pay students and research associates before the funding is on an account. That's just not a formality. I don't know where it is. Maybe somebody can tell me. It's not on an account, so.
Okay, so I asked our folks, and they said they already saw the line item in the whatever has to happen at the legislate in the background with the budget. Yeah. So from my understanding, that transfer has already been reflected in CSU's budget. And I copied Henry Sobenet on that email, and I did not hear back. So Thomas, why don't we try to figure out how to address that offline? Because obviously We want to make sure that you have whatever you need in your line items so we can get the work done.
Yeah. Okay, that'd be great. And then with respect to how often to meet and get feedback, I mean, we're pretty used to, run a lot of big projects up here, and we have the team, and we're happy to give some. We could provide updates, obviously, on maybe every second month or something like that throughout the year. And then we could set up additional meetings if needed. If we need input from the group, again, if we know all these individuals that is on this call here and they know us, we can certainly have some offline, discussions and reach out to all. That's a lot of experts on this call beyond the CSU team. And so it'd be great to just have access to those individuals. I'm not sure we need to gather all of us at once, but maybe we do for now. I don't know, Jason Quinn might have a different opinion about how often to meet, but maybe we start out every second month. It will take a little bit of time to get up to speed. The first thing is that we need to read a lot of papers, right? And we need to summarize and critically evaluate, all the evidence out there. Just because you have a research paper with published information does not mean it's good science. And so that's where we come in. We're good at evaluating whether it's good science or bad science and whether we can trust it or not. That's the first phase. The experiments in the lab, we need to go in and design the experiment. So that would take some time. So I think maybe we do every second month for now. I don't know what Jason thinks.
That sounds good. I think he had a flight to catch.
Okay.
So he left the meeting already. But I agree with every second month for now.
For now, right? Yeah.
Okay. Jenna, you had your hand up. I think you have your hand up.
I had to unmute myself. That used to Zoom. Yeah, I mean, I guess every other month is okay. I would caution against having a lot of one-off meetings with folks because that'll start a snowball effect with people being left out. But so I'm not sure I would support that. But I mean, what are these milestones? March 1st, 2024, June, right? So we're really on September now, so it's only October, December. I mean, that will only give us a couple meetings before March 4th.
But we have to move the dates. Since we are so delayed in the process, we still need the same amount of time, that we had originally. So I think originally we were supposed to start 1st of June, if I'm not mistaken. Now it's nearly 1st of September. So we need to move things accordingly. If we're done early, great, but we haven't started yet.
I mean, we do have statutory milestones that we have to meet: the March 1st, 2024, the June 2024, and then December. So, we do have to meet and align with those statutory requirements as far as those milestones. And I mean, I think every other month, as far as this large group, would be okay. Maybe the regulatory, advisory group can meet on the off months, Karen. I mean, that's just a suggestion. Because we won't have a lot to talk about without their input. So, if everybody is okay with the every other month, then maybe the regulatory folks can meet on those off months to just kind of discuss our inner workings. But yeah, that's just my suggestion.
Jenna, when you say the regulatory advisory group or folks could meet, what do you anticipate that they would talk about?
Well, that's what I mean. If we needed an additional meeting, I guess we could meet on those off months, but maybe I think ultimately we have to make a recommendation based on the study, right? That's going to be the ultimate thing that we have to do. So I guess we could talk about.
We're kind of going to be beholden to the cadence of CSU, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It is what it is, and if they can't find their funding yet, it's just going to continue to put them behind. And so I think we need to figure out what's happening there, and then why don't we start off? I'll schedule a meeting. Why don't we say? Do you want to do it in 8 weeks, Thomas, or maybe 6?
It's okay to have one early. I mean, and it doesn't have to be a 60-minute meeting. Maybe we have some questions as we get started, and we can get some clarification, right, from the folks who wrote the bill. I think that makes a ton of sense, right? So as we get deeper into all these different tasks, I'm sure like, hey, can you clarify what you had hoped to see from us on this particular task, right? Okay. Most of it, I think, makes perfect sense, but sure, we can have one, and then we can have a Q&A and additional feedback, and then we can decide on the next meeting. Maybe we don't have to have regular meetings. You know, maybe we schedule meetings as needed. I mean, that makes more sense. I just don't want to, you know, I know how hard it is, how hard it is for you to get the whole group together.
Yeah, you all are very busy people.
Exactly.
So why don't my goal here is to try to figure out if I can come up with a meeting in the next 4 to 6 weeks for a check-in. Do you all want me to invite Representative McCormick, the sponsor of the bill? Okay. And then am I hearing, Thomas, that you might want someone from the School of Mines to talk about any work that they might be doing around biochar?
Would be great, yeah.
I'll see if I saw a note there for to reach out to someone, and I'll see if she's available.
Hey, guys, would you like to have, I have 3 contacts at NREL who are working on related things. They seem quite eager to be involved. Would you be interested in any of those?
Absolutely, yeah. I work personally with Mike Griffin. Maybe
Mike Griffin is one of them.
Yeah, so I work on a project with him right now, and we do a lot of work down at NREL with one of my postdocs. So I think absolutely, and I told Mike already about this initiative, because if there is a pilot scale later, it would make a lot of sense to potentially collaborate with NREL. They have big pyrolysis units and can do mass balance and so forth. So yes.
Okay, so I will get that information to Karen McGowan, right?
Yep. And then we'll ask if they want to come and chit chat about what they're working on related to biochar. And then Michelle, I wonder if the next meeting, if we want to put some thoughts around given the limitations of some of the funding and the scope of the work, how we might be able to tackle some of the community engagement pieces before we get to the end here and are making recommendations. I don't want to task you with that, but do you think you might have some thoughts between now and the next meeting that you'd like to share, or something that you want us to all think about before the next meeting as part of a discussion?
Yeah, for sure. I was actually just starting to chat in that maybe Stephen and I can bring some like environmental justice, key insights, potential obstacles and benefits from that end, and community engagement.
Great.
Yeah, or if there's some other folks that we need to bring in, but yeah, I would really appreciate getting some time to do that. And then I shared the link, and then hopefully if you create some place where we can all be communicating, we can look at the biochar and environmental justice report that I did. I think it's a good introduction.
Okay. So I have 2 thoughts about that. One is I'm going to work with our communications person to set up a biochar space where people can look at these recordings if they want to, look at all these reports that we're sharing. I don't know what everyone's capacity is for Google, but I'm also happy to start like a Google group where you can download things and share things. But I know that some of the outside entities don't belong to Google. And so if I set up a Google group, do folks have access and are able to participate in a Google group and where you can download things and share things?
We do.
Michelle, how about you? Okay. And Mike? Okay. All right. So I'll start I will start some sort of a Google group where people can post things and download things. But I want to make sure we have an outward facing, some way to communicate what the group is working on as well, and be able to post the work of this group. Anything else and then obviously maybe a check-in from CSU also at the next meeting where you all are, and if you need anything from us, or does that sound good?
Yes.
Anything else for the next agenda? Okay. In general, are there any, and I apologize because I think that the biochar gentleman had trouble meeting on Mondays, but this is when I could get the CSU folks because Brooke reached out and came up with a date and time and I just grabbed it. Is there a date or time that is just off limits? So for me as a commissioner, our hearings are on Wednesdays. It will be very hard for me to convene this group on a Wednesday, for example. Is there like a no-go date for anybody?
Wednesdays and Thursdays are kind of really bad for me.
Anybody else with a no-go? All right, I will try to work around that and see how we can get Jonah involved in the next meeting. So it may be good to have someone who actually produces biochar putting in their 2 cents as well.
What could be really beneficial, I think, early on is if you can get a person in to talk about how these wells are being cemented right now. Really
Dave can do that. I'll have
okay.
Dave talk about.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay, anything else?
No.
All right. I really appreciate everyone's time and thank you for the bumpy kickoff. I'm super appreciative. And I will work on setting up our next meeting. If you have anything else that you want to be shared or you want to make sure it's included, just ping me and I'll try to accommodate everybody. All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you in about a month.
Thank you for hosting.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. Now I got to stop recording.
Mm-hmm.